Greetings, gamers! Welcome to the very first installment of a new series that I have concocted that I like to call Dissecting Rogue Decks. And in this series, I'm going to be going over each and every individual rogue deck that I like to play throughout the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! First and foremost, with Monarchs. I'm going to be going over individually each type of Monarch deck that I like playing, which is a lot of them, because there are so many different boss monsters and so many different ways to play them all. So, the first part of this series is going to be very Monarch heavy. Hopefully you enjoy it regardless. Without further ado, it is time to get into things. Now, I figured I would start off with the very most basic version of Monarchs that I find is likely around what you're going to build and play off of, which I call Monarch Reign. That's at least what I've named this deck. It is all about one card alone, and that is Domain of the True Monarchs. So in Monarch Reign, there aren't really many Monarchs in this deck. It's just Ether, Erebus, and Kirez. And the reason why this is because competitively, Monarchs aren't really all that great. I am going to be showing off rogue decks, right? These are rogue decks. We're not talking about meta or even meta crushing decks, though I do have competitive versions of some of my rogue decks, and I'm going to be showing those off as well. Even if they do have some card pieces that are very much so deleterious and make you think, man, that's pretty darn close to what could be meta. So, a lot of folks don't understand the difference in Yu-Gi-Oh! Between an archetype, an engine, a tech card, and a generic card. So the archetype for Monarchs is just Monarchs and the Monarch monsters and so on and so forth. The engine would be what allows you to draw and summon and continue to do so. And the engine that I have, obviously, for Monarchs is the engine built in. Some archetypes do not have an engine, so they have to rely on other engines. I'm thinking of Kaijus. Kaijus don't really have an engine. They have some ability to grab some things, but not an ability to grab everything, and it's usually after you've done a lot of stuff first. I like to call that a 5+ card combo deck. Now, tech cards are something very interesting. So a good example of a tech card for any normal summon, tribute summon deck would be Time Tearing Morganite. And then a generic card would be something like Raigeki and Harpy's Feather Duster. So I'm going to be going over many of those things for each of my rogue decks and breaking down how those things function in the deck and whether or not I have them and whether or not I recommend them. For instance, a good tech card for Monarchs is actually Book of Moon. And the reason why Book of Moon is such a good card is because if you normal summon Idea or Eidos, which are the weak points of this deck, by the way, they are the strength, but also the weakness of the monster summoning and mechanics in this archetype. They are the strength and the weakness. And the reason why they are the weakness is because if they are impermed or effect veilered, then they don't get their effects and you don't get your tribute summons. And that's kind of a bit of a pain. So Book of Moon can stop this because you can chain this to an imperm or an effect veiler, turn your monster face down, and then still get the effect off because they can no longer be impermed, they're not face-up cards. You still get your effect off, and then you still can do your tribute summons because it doesn't matter if your monsters are face down, their effects went off, you can still do what you need to do. It's pretty great in that factor. So some cards are really good in these kinds of decks. First thing I will say is that a lot of people will recommend Kashtira as a great archetype for supplementing the extenders in a Monarch deck. And the reason why this is because you can normal summon even high-level Kashtira monsters if you have certain spells and traps, or special summon if you have certain spells or traps, or just be able to special summon the monster immediately if you control no other monsters. So they're very good extenders. I will absolutely admit that. But the reason why I haven't gone with a Kashtira archetype here is because I have a better engine a much better engine for Monarchs that I have poured a lot of resources into making sure I have, whereas Kashtira I don't. So Kashtira can work, absolutely it can work. It's a fantastic way to make a good engine out of Monarchs and be able to get your monsters on the field and tribute summon and so on and so forth. But it's not necessary, and I'll show you why later. But first, I'm talking about Monarch Reign. And the very first card I want to talk about is Idea, the Heavenly Squire. If this card is normal or special summoned, you can special summon one monster with 800 attack, 1000 defense from your deck in defense position, except Idea, the Heavenly Squire. Also, you cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck for the rest of this turn. So you'll notice I don't have an extra deck here. In fact, there is only one version of my Monarchs decks that has an extra deck that's actually usable. And even in that case, it is very secondary. Very secondary. And the reason why this is because I feel like Monarchs don't need the extra deck support. They don't really need that the capacity in order to have like an extra deck and then use extra deck monsters. I'm not going to lie to you. The extra deck is meta, right? It is meta in every sense of the word in Yu-Gi-Oh! So if you're running a deck without an extra deck, regardless of what it does, it is not meta. It could be anti-meta, and it could be successful at times, but certain decks are just going to stonewall you. And even if they can't immediately, they might have the generic cards or the tech cards to stonewall you. And what this means is that you have to understand, and I'm being very careful here, if you're going to make any of the rogue decks that I show you throughout this series, they do cost a bit to make. I have URs, SRs, and so on and so forth to make these decks. I'm not recommending that you make any of these decks. I'm just telling you that I love these archetypes and that they are some of my favorite cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! And they're a lot of fun, especially to play casually or to play on solo or to play with friends and so on and so forth. That's fun. I don't find my kicks on Yu-Gi-Oh! Or pretty much any game in the competitive scene. And the reason why is because I have a hard time coping with the fact that people believe they're having fun whilst everybody's playing the exact same deck or the exact same monster or the exact same shooter or the exact same gun in a game or the exact same strategy. You're not having fun. You're boring. You're incredibly boring. Unfortunately, very sorry to tell you that. So just as a disclaimer, these decks are fun. I would recommend trying them out and seeing what they can do. I really wish that Yu-Gi-Oh! Had a sandbox mode where you could play with whatever deck you wanted and make whatever cards you wanted and check them out. You kind of can do this in some way, shape, or form throughout the solo mode. You can't make the decks whatever way you want. You play with the loaners that they have, and then you can see the strategies. The problem is that most of the loaners, especially in the higher starred duels, are specifically made so that you have to get a very particular strategy off in order to win that duel. And if you don't, you just lose because the opponent's deck is better. And I don't really like that, frankly. I really just don't like that. In fact, most of the solo duels I completed with my own deck, not the loaner decks, because I find it kind of frustrating to have to play a match over and over and over again with a deck that's obviously inferior to what my opponent has. That's one of the many reasons why I just can't stand the meta. So I'm not going to deal with that in solo. That's my little rant over. So you cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck, but this does allow you to grab any one of your squires, which there are only two, Idea and Eidos. And then there's a bunch of vassals. The vassals are specifically designed to support each and every individual Mega Monarch or Monarch in general, and I think that's very cool. Very cool. These, Idea and Eidos, support every one of the Monarchs. Every single one of the Monarchs. Even though that they were specifically made, Idea was specifically made for Ether, Eidos was specifically made for Erebus, they support every one of them, which is very cool. If this card is sent to the graveyard, regardless of the way it's sent, you can target one of your banished Monarch spells and traps added to your hand. You can only use each effect of Idea, the Heavenly Squire, once per turn. So she is recursion. And the type of recursion she has is actually insanely powerful for this deck and archetype because it allows you to use cards like Pantheism of the Monarch multiple times. In fact, there's been turns where I have used this card more than 3 times in the same turn, which is absolutely insane. Eidos is next. Eidos, the Underworld Squire. If this card is normal summoned or special summoned during your main phase this turn, you tribute summon one monster in addition to your normal summon set. You can only gain this effect once per turn. You can banish this card from your graveyard, then target one monster with 800 attack, 1000 defense in your graveyard, except Eidos, the Underworld Squire, special summon it in defense position. Also, you cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck for the rest of this turn. You can only use this effect of Eidos, the Underworld Squire, once per turn. So when you normal summon him regularly, he doesn't block you out of using your extra deck, but if you special summon him or use him to banish him from the graveyard to special summon a different vassal, it does block you out of using the extra deck. What's interesting is this is extension. So first and foremost, your key play would be to use Eidos or Adea on the field, summon them, normal summon them in order to get their effects off. And then on the following turn, you would banish Eidos, the Heavenly Squire, summon Adea from the graveyard, and then she would get another Eidos, or whatever card you need, whatever one of the vassals or squires you need. And the reason why this is so very effective is because when they're both in the grave and you use that effect, though it can be called by, of course, it is an extender, and it doesn't block you from normal summoning, and it's very powerful in that sense for this archetype. So I absolutely love Adea and Eidos. I think they're very good cards. Now you'll notice I have one Vanity's Fiend and one Majesty's Fiend. So Vanity's Fiend cannot be special summoned. They both cannot be special summoned. Neither player can special summon monsters if you have Vanity's Fiend on the field. And then neither player can activate monster effects if Majesty's Fiend is on the field. These two cards are insanely powerful, but I only have one each in this deck. And some people would look at this and be like, well, why wouldn't you have more? Because they're bricky. See, the issue is that if you're running Domain of the True Monarchs, you kind of don't need Vanity's Fiend. Not necessarily completely, right? You're only shutting off extra deck summons if you have Domain of the Monarchs in play. But what's more important is Majesty's Fiend. And you would almost think, well, if Majesty's Fiend is important, why don't you have more than one? I have a way to search them out. Any monster that has 2400 attack and 1000 defense, or 2800 attack and 1000 defense can be searched. In the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Doesn't matter what it is. Doesn't matter what monster it is or what archetype it is from. It can be searched by Monarchs. And the reason why this is because Monarchs are an archetype that has specific monsters for it, but also generically supports all forms of tribute summoning, except for True Dracos. I mean, kind of. True Dracos can still work with Monarchs, but True Dracos want to do like tributing with continuous spells and traps for the most of them instead, because then you're not needing to normal summon in order to get them on the field. You can literally have a deck without any normal summons and just tribute, which is pretty cool. I have a True Draco deck, and we'll go over one of those one day. However, the fact remains is that Majesty's Fiend is searchable. If I wasn't playing Domain of the True Monarchs, I would probably run 3 Vanity's Fiend. But because I'm running Domain, I think there's only a need of 1. And really, the one that I want on the field is Majesty's Fiend. When I show you the competitive version of this deck with the engine I have, the engine that I have allows me to special summon monsters by their own effects without activating an effect, which is crazy because it means even if this card is on the field, because it says neither player can activate monster effects, because those effects are continuous effects, I can special summon them. What's even more interesting is that this is true of any continuous effect from a monster that allows that monster to be special summoned, or continuous effect from the monster that allows it to be activated or allows it to be used. Like an example of this would be Slifer the Sky Dragon. So Slifer the Sky Dragon has an effect that is a continuous effect, where if your opponent summons a monster with 2000 or less attack points in attack position, or any monster, doesn't matter if it's 2000 or less, but Any monster in attack position loses 2,000 attack points, and if it goes down to 0, it just dies. That's a continuous effect. That's an example of something that would still work even with Majesty's Fiend. Now, of course, I'm not running Slife for the Sky Dragon, but it was just an example. Then I have Kiraz the Light Monarch. When this card is normal or special summoned, you can target up to 2 cards on the field, destroy those targets. And if you do, each player can draw 1 card for each of the cards he controlled that was destroyed by this effect. This card cannot attack during the turn it is normal or special summoned. So what's crazy about this is because Ether can be summoned on your opponent's turn, and she special summons a monster with either 2,400 in attack and 1,000 defense, or 2,800 or more and 1,000 defense to your side of the field, you can actually use Kiraz as disruption during your opponent's turn. Now on your turn, you can actually use it to get your own cards into the graveyard, like Return of the Monarchs and March of the Monarchs, if you were wanting to use extra deck summoning, because both of these cut off your extra deck summoning while they're on the field. It's very interesting. And then you would draw 2 for that. So you would destroy them and you would draw 2, and it's not even that big of a deal because you could easily get those cards either back in your hand or back in the deck because of the recursion, the constant recursion that the Monarch archetype has. The Monarchs are my favorite archetype in the franchise, and it's just because of all the crazy things they do. I love tribute summoning. I love the old school feel about Monarchs. I love that they stun lock the extra deck. I love that they have insane draw power and insane recursion power, and it's just so amazing. Kiraz is pretty good. You're basically never really going to summon him on your turn unless you really need him to. You can summon him on your opponent's turn, and as long as you are careful, because you can miss timing with this, it is a when this card is normal summoned, not if this card is normal or special summoned. So because it is a when, it can miss timing, and if you miss the timing by chaining something else to it, or if your opponent chains something to it, then you don't get the destruction effect, which is very, very unfortunate, but that's just how things go sometimes, right? Now here is one of my extenders, Kashtira Ogre, 2,800 attack and 1,000 defense. He is searchable in the engine. He also works with the other Monarch spells and traps, which is pretty insane. Definitely love that. If you control no monsters, you can special summon this card from your hand. So he's an extender. You can put a monster on the field and have tribute fodder or whatever you need. You can only use each of the following effects of Kashtira Ogre once per turn. Now, the first effect doesn't matter because I don't have any Kashtira traps in the deck, but the second effect does matter. When this card declares an attack, or if your opponent activates a monster effect, except during the damage step, you can excavate up to 5 cards from the top of your opponent's deck, banish 1 excavated card face down, and place the rest on the top of the deck in the same order. This gives you deck knowledge, as well as it punishes your opponent activating monster effects, and it allows you to mill your opponent's deck. So I do think this is interesting. You can even tribute summon Kashtira Ogre. Sounds weird because he's an extender, but there are times where you're not going to have another tribute summon in your hand, and it would be better to just have him tribute summoned onto the field if you have no other way to tribute any other monster, because the thing is many of your effects only are active while you have a tribute summoned monster on the field. So he can be a great one because he also has an effect on the field. No Monarch in the game has an effect on the field. They have trigger effects upon summon, and then their effects are dead after that. There's good reason for this, and I'm going to show that off later. Now, Ether, the Heavenly Monarch, is probably the most important extender or like support piece of the Monarch engine. I have her in every single Monarch deck, but I also have Erebus in every single Monarch deck, and the reason why is because both of them are just insanely good cards. They're very fun. So you can tribute summon this card by tributing 1 tribute summon monster. So if you have a monster that's already been tribute summoned, you can tribute summon over it without needing a second tribute. This is true of both Ether and Erebus and all of the Mega Monarchs. They all share this effect. If this card is tribute summoned, you can send 2 Monarch spells and trap cards with different names from your hand and or deck to the graveyard, and if you do, special summon 1 monster with 2,400 or more attack and 1,000 defense from your deck, but return it to the hand during the end phase. During your opponent's main phase, if this card is in your hand, so before I actually go over the second effect, this first effect is amazing. You can bring out any monster to your field that's necessary to be brought out, and then it returns to your hand. So that sounds kind of bad, but the problem is that Monarchs typically, there's a couple of exceptions. There's Kiraz, and I believe there's one other Monarch, I think Daig, I believe is the other Monarch. There's only 2 Monarchs that are exceptions to this. When they're special summoned, they get their effects off. But every other Monarch needs to be tribute summoned to get their effects off. So if you special summon it from the deck to the field and then put it back in your hand, that allows you to go to a different play. And because the way Monarchs work, believe me, you can make this work. You can make some interesting plays with this. So during your opponent's main phase, if this card is in your hand, you can banish 1 Monarch spell and trap card from your graveyard immediately after this effect resolves. Tribute summon this card. This is a quick effect. I believe this is the only instance in the entire game of Yu-Gi-Oh! That a monster has an inbuilt quick effect tribute summon on your opponent's turn. And I could be wrong. I could be wrong because I don't know all 12,000 plus cards by heart, right? But this is insane. This is actually very powerful because it allows you to disrupt, but it also allows you to protect your monsters and keep your stuff going. Either way, it's very interesting, very cool how all of this works. She's a very fun card. Now, what's crazy is that the tribute summon with sending 2 spell and trap cards, Monarch spell and trap cards from your deck to your graveyard. Both Erebus and Ether has this, and it's actually the reason why they're the most competitive versions of the Monarchs, because they set up your graveyard in a way that none of your other Monarchs do. So because of this, they have that potential to really just make your plays for you, because a lot of your Monarch spells and traps have effects in the grave. Now, Erebus, the Underworld Monarch, is your boss monster. He is the most important boss piece in this deck. He's not necessarily the most important monster to get on the field. That would probably be Majesty's Fiend or Vanity's Fiend. But when it comes to your boss monster, Erebus is just, he's very good. And the reason why is because he has the tribute summon effect, just like Ether. But then he says, if this card is tribute summoned, you can send 2 Monarch spell and trap cards with different names from your hand and or deck to the graveyard. And if you do, shuffle 1 card from your opponent's hand, at random, graveyard, or his side of the field into the deck. So this is shuffle removal that doesn't target. This is insanely powerful. The only cards that are not affected by this are literally cards that say they're unaffected by card effects. That's pretty much it. Otherwise, this will shuffle everything else into the deck, whether it is in the graveyard, on the field, or in the hand. But if it's in the hand, it's at random. Honestly, shuffling a card out of your opponent's hand turn 1, and this deck always wants to go first, by the way. Pretty much always. It really doesn't have any going second tools. So it's just a powerful piece, because getting a card out of your opponent's hand in the immediate moment that you get this monster on the field, plus you have all your other effects on the field, like for instance a skill drain that only works against your opponent, and then also the ability to shut off your opponent's extra deck summons, it's insanely powerful. Once per turn during either player's main phase, if this card is in your graveyard, you can discard 1 Monarch spell and trap card, then target 1 monster in your graveyard with 2,400 or more attack and 1,000 defense added to your hand. This is recursion of your monsters. He can recur himself, he can recur Ether, he can recur Kashtira Ogre, he can recur Kiraz, he can even recur Majesty's Fiend, because his stats are of that lineup. He just can't recur Vanity's Fiend, because unfortunately they gave Vanity's Fiend 1,200 defense instead of 1,000 defense. It's very sad that that's the case. That's just how it goes. So he's obviously a very good monster. The next card I have to talk about is another extender. This is actually a fantastic extender. He's very good in any deck that doesn't need an extra deck. If you don't use the extra deck, Ankh-Fright is amazing. Cannot be normal summon set, must be special summoned from your face-up extra deck by having no cards in your extra deck except Ankh-Fright. You can only special summon Ankh-Fright once per turn this way. So you can have multiple copies of Ankh-Fright face up in your extra deck, and he can still summon himself. As long as Anka-Mu-Fright is the only card in your extra deck, regardless, he can always summon himself, but it's only once per turn. If this face-up card in the monster zone leaves the field, banish it. This is very important because most pendulum monsters go back to the extra deck. You don't want this out of a pendulum monster in this deck. That's why you don't see any other pendulums in my Monarch deck. Because the fact of the matter is, I have a lot of cards that have effects based on me not having an extra deck. So, because of that, Anka-Mu-Fright supports that because he's banished after he leaves the field. His pendulum effect is if you have no cards in your extra deck except Anka-Mu-Fright, you can destroy this card, then draw one card. You can only use this effect of Anka-Mu-Fright once per turn. So you can set him as a pendulum on your pendulum scale, destroy him, draw a card, and then you get a free tribute summon. And because it's a continuous effect, this is what I was talking about, it's a continuous effect, his special summon, it is not blocked by Majesty's Fiend, which is insanely good. Of course, I have Pot of Avarice as recursion. Target 5 monsters in your graveyard, shuffle all 5 into the deck, then draw 2 cards. Very good, very powerful, very necessary in a lot of means, in a lot of ways. Of course, there are monsters that want to be in my graveyard, for instance, Idea and Eidos, but you don't really want more than one copy of each in your graveyard at a single time. So Pot of Avarice is still very useful for this. And then Tenacity of the Monarchs. Reveal one monster in your hand with 2400 attack and 1000 defense, or 2800 attack and 1000 defense. Add one Monarch spell and trap card from your deck to your hand, except Tenacity of the Monarchs. You can only activate one Tenacity of the Monarchs per turn. So, this is what I was going to talk about. There are 3 major eras in Yu-Gi-Oh! There is the 3+ card combo era, which is basically the no card combo era. It's the beginning of Yu-Gi-Oh! For a very long period of time. I think it's around like 10-12 years-ish. Yu-Gi-Oh! Was basically a 3+ card combo. That basically means that your decks really don't have a combo. They just need you to have a bunch of cards in your hand in order to get things going. Monarchs are not so. Monarchs are a 2-card combo deck. That's the reason why at one time Monarchs were actually very much meta, because there was the 2-card combo era, and they are a 2-card combo deck, and they hard stun and hard block certain decks, which is very powerful. They're actually still decent, even in the modern day, but the modern day is 1-card combo. This is why Yu-Gi-Oh! Is becoming very stale and also very annoying to play on a competitive level, because everything is basically just able to feed into itself. You need a monster with these stats in your hand in order to use this card. Just like with Pantheism of the Monarchs, you need to send one Monarch spell and trap card from your hand to the graveyard to activate its effect. This is a 2-card combo deck. You cannot do anything without monsters on the field, without cards in the hand. Spells and traps in the field, spells and traps in the hand. 2-card combo. It's always doing something with another card. And it's very good at it. It's a very good engine. It's a very fun engine, but it does not particularly lend itself to being competitive with the modern day. Pantheism of the Monarchs is the main function of the engine of the Monarchs. And it is one of, if not the most powerful, archetypal draw spells ever created. And the reason why it's not limited, semi-limited, or banned is because it is supporting a deck and an archetype that's not functionally good, honestly. And I'm actually kind of thankful for that, because if it was limited or semi-limited, it would be pretty much terrible, because you need as many of these in your deck as possible so that you can draw into them, so you can do more plays and draw more and more and more, and it's just amazing. This card essentially has no cost if you have a certain setup. So how it works is send one Monarch spell and trap card from your hand to the graveyard, draw 2 cards. If you send any other spell or trap in the Monarchs that likes to be in the graveyard, for instance, the Prime Monarch, this card has no cost. It literally has no cost at base, just looking at this effect, because Pantheism wants to be in the graveyard, as well as the Prime Monarchs wants to be in the graveyard. Certain of the other Monarch spells and traps want to be in the graveyard. Now, I don't have many of those in this deck, but there are a lot of them. So, because of that, if you send something that wants to be in the graveyard, it has no cost, period. And then you can banish this card from your graveyard, reveal 3 Monarch spells and trap cards from your deck. Your opponent chooses 1 for you to add to your hand, and you shuffle the rest back into the deck. You can only use this effect to Pantheism of the Monarchs once per turn. So they banish to reveal 3 cards, 3 Monarch spells and traps, for your opponent to choose 1 for you to take, is once per turn, but the send 1 Monarch spell trap card from your hand to the graveyard to draw 2 is not once per turn. This is amazing. So, even if you don't send a Monarch spell and trap to the grave that wants to be in the grave, after you banish this card from the grave and get a card from your deck to your hand, it is again at no cost. However, there's another way to make this even more cost effective, and I'm going to show that later. Next is Time-Tearing Morganite. It is the only tech card I have in this deck. The rest are generic, so I have Jar of Avarice and Pot of Avarice. Those are generic cards for this deck, and they're just generic recursion. But I have this tech card specifically because it is fantastic. For the rest of this duel, apply the following effects. You cannot activate monster effects in the hand. This is actually very bad for Ether. Ether cannot use her effect to tribute summon herself on your opponent's turn if you activate this. She just can't do this anymore. I still think this card is worth using regardless of that fact because it's just that powerful. So that's the drawback, but here are the good things about it. Draw 2 cards instead of 1 for your normal draw during your draw phase. This immediately gains advantage the first time you draw with this. And then you can conduct 2 normal summon sets per turn, not just 1. So it ups your limit to 2. Now, technically, with this deck, you can actually up it to 3 because it does not conflict with Ados's effect because he says you can tribute summon 1 monster in addition to your normal summon set. This is just increasing your normal summon set limit. This gives you a tribute summon in addition to that, which is pretty darn crazy. So you can banish this card from your graveyard, then discard 1 Time-Tearing Morganite. Your opponent cannot activate monster effects when you normal summon this turn. This is actually the reason. It's a soft reason, and I'm throwing it out there. It's obviously not necessarily that great because Book of Moon would just be better for this. Called by the Grave would just be better for this in most instances. But this is one of the reasons why I'm not necessarily so bothered by not having like Book of Moon or Called by the Grave in this deck, because Time-Tearing Morganite, if I have 2 in my hand, I could use the 1 and then I could banish to make my monsters immune to monster effects on their summon this turn, which is pretty good. Next is Domain of the True Monarchs. This is single-handedly one of, if not the best field spell in all of Yu-Gi-Oh! Because it's that powerful. It says, when you have no cards in your extra deck, and you are the only player that controls a tribute summon monster, your opponent cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck. With this effect alone, I think this card is one of the best field spells ever created. Now, of course, you do have to have some setup to get this rolling, but obviously Monarchs do nothing but get tribute summons on the board. So as long as your opponent can't get your tribute summon monster off the board or get your domain off the board, your opponent cannot special summon from the extra deck if you have no monsters in your extra deck, which is why you don't want Akamu Fright clogging up space in your extra deck, or anything else for that matter. This effect is amazing. It basically puts you and your opponent on a level playing field where you're basically saying to your opponent, look, we're playing old school Yu-Gi-Oh, buddy, whether you like it or not. If a tribute summon monster you control attacks an opponent's monster, it gains 800 attack during damage calculation only. This is only affecting you on your turn, but it's actually pretty good because it even means that cards like Vanity's Fiend and Majesty's Fiend go to 3,200 attack on your turn when you're attacking with them, as long as you have this effect on the field. It's pretty good. Pretty good. I wish it was just a straight 800 buff to all of your tribute summon monsters, regardless of whether it's your turn or your opponent's turn. I think that would be pretty great. Some people would think that's a bit overpowered. I don't. Raigeki exists. Harpy's Feather Duster exists. Heavy Storm exists, Lightning Storm exists, blah, 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 evenly matched, so on and so forth. Honestly, there's so many things that just blank this, right? So basically, the only way I'm winning on turn 1 with Domain of the True Monarchs and like Erebus or something like that else on my field is if my opponent has no response. He drew a bad hand, and that's just part of a card game that doesn't have mulligans, right? That's just, you got to take it for what it is. Once per turn, you can reduce the level of one monster with 2800 attack and 1000 defense in your hand by 2 until the end of this turn, even after they are set or summoned, and even if this card leaves the field. So you can reduce the level in order to make it so that they only need 1 tribute. It's a level modulation. It's pretty good. It's not fantastic, but it is very good in this archetype because it means that your big boss monsters that are 8-star that need 2 tributes only need 1 after they are level modulated. Even Kashtira Ogre is affected by this, so he'll go down to a 5-star. It's unfortunate that there are no 2800 attack, 1000 defense monsters that are level 6, because if there were that you could slot into this deck, then you could have basically a normal summon monster that has that kind of stat without even having to tribute, which is pretty insane to think of, but you know, Konami doesn't necessarily want you doing these kinds of things. The very next card I have to talk about is March of the Monarchs. Tribute summon monsters you control cannot be destroyed by card effects. Also, neither player can target them with card effects. You cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck. This is a continuous spell, so for as long as it's up, your monsters are protected from destruction and target, which is pretty good. The reason why I only have 1, as well as 1 of Return, 1 of Awaken, 1 of Monarchs Erupt, is because you only need 3 of the Monarch spells and traps that you're specifically going to search, with something like Pantheism being banished in the graveyard, so on and so forth. And you can supplement this by, for instance, if you were to banish Pantheism and you really wanted Monarchs, March of the Monarchs, you could literally just reveal March of the Monarchs as well as 2 Tenacities or just 3 Tenacities, and your opponent has to pick one of those, and then you can grab this card. So the next card is Return of the Monarchs. You cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck. When you tribute summon a monster, you can activate one of these effects. Add from your deck to your hand 1 monster with 2400 attack and 1000 defense with a different name from that tribute summon monster, or add from your deck to your hand 1 monster with 2800 attack and 1000 defense with a different name from that tribute summon monster. The tribute summon monster must be face up on the field to activate and to resolve this effect. You can only use this effect of Return of the Monarchs once per turn. So this is a great card. It's interesting because it's basically generic searcher for any tribute summon monster that has these effects or these stats. I think I would change this card if I could, or at least maybe make an update to this card so that the Monarchs could play a little bit better and a little bit more consistently. So what I would do is I would take out this effect that the tribute summon monster must be face up on the field to activate and to resolve this effect. So if somebody chains something that blows up your tribute summon monster, you'll still get the search. I think that's fair, right? You're tribute summoning a monster onto the field. This is an effect that's giving you a search because you tribute summoned. You're already putting into resources to get a monster on the field in the first place, so on and so forth. I think that's enough of a drawback, right? And then I would add an effect that allows you to add from your deck to your hand 1 monster with 800 attack and 1000 defense. So you could get any one of your vassals or squires to your hand with this effect as well, because I think that's almost more important than grabbing one of your tribute summon monsters in most cases. Of course, with this deck, I'm always going to search Majesty's Fiend first if I don't have him in the hand. Next is the Monarch Storm 4th. Once during this turn, if you would tribute a monster for a tribute summon, you can tribute 1 monster your opponent controls, even though you do not control it. You can only activate 1 the Monarch Storm 4th per turn. During the turn you activated this card, you cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck. So another way that you are blocked out of the extra deck, but this is actually one of the stronger removal cards that the Monarchs have, and it basically allows you to eat your opponent's monster. It does not work on unaffected monsters or monsters that aren't bothered by spells or something like that. And the reason why is because of rulings. I could go on a huge tangent. I'm not going to, but I could go on a huge tangent about how I hate Yu-Gi-Oh! Rulings. There's nothing on this card that says that a monster that is unaffected by spells or whatever would be safe from this. And the reason why I bring this up as being important is because there are other spells, particularly Soul Crossing for the Divine Beasts, that don't have this drawback. And yet there is nothing on that card that would dare say that they can bypass an unaffected monster's effects. It's wild. It's wild, right? There's nothing on this card that would suggest that. There's nothing on that card that would suggest that. Vice versa, whatever. So unfortunately, I think that they did the Monarchs a disservice, and they probably made that ruling during the time that this deck was more relevant. But the fact remains is that there's just no real reason for that nerf. It's still very good removal for the most part, and you're going to oftentimes be able to get some kind of good use out of it, especially if you level modulate one of your big monsters in your hand, and then you only have to take one monster. You take your opponent's monster. You didn't even have to put a monster on your field. A lot of Monarch decks like going second for this reason. This is just not one of them. If you're running Domain, you typically want to go first because you want to set up the lock first. If you're running Monarchs Erupt, you want to go first because you want to set up the skill drain first. But otherwise, typically Monarchs like going second because the 2-card combo era and the 3-card combo era, those eras in Yu-Gi-Oh! Were built around going second being better. And that was even during a time where going first, you drew a 6th card, which is insane to think that going second was that good back in the day, but it's absolutely the case. So the next card I have to talk about is the Monarchs Awaken. If you have no cards in your extra deck, target one face-up tribute summon monster you control. Its effects are negated. Also, it is unaffected by the effects of cards other than this card. So you get an unaffected monster. This is only useful to be given to any one of your tribute summon monsters that are not Vanity's Fiend and Majesty's Fiend, because then you'll shut off their effects. So you would want to give it to like Erebus or Ether or Kashtira Ogre, because then, and they have to be tribute summoned, obviously, then you have a monster that is unaffected by card effects. I love this card, and I think it's very underrated. I have Jar of Avarice. Target 5 cards in your graveyard except Jar of Avarice. Shuffle all 5 into the deck, then draw 1 card. You can only activate 1 Jar of Avarice per turn. I have the Monarchs Erupt. Activate this card only if you have no cards in your extra deck and control a tribute summoned monster. Negate the effects of all face-up monsters on the field while those monsters are face-up on the field except tribute summoned monsters. During your end phase, if you control no tribute summoned monsters, send this card to the graveyard. So you can recur it, and you can search it. This is the reason why I only have one of these, even though it is literally a skill drain. And it's very powerful, by the way, because it doesn't affect any of your tribute summon monsters, even on summon. They're considered tribute summon monsters the moment that they are summoned, regardless, so they get their effects off, whereas your opponents can't do anything with their normal summons, with their special summons, unless they have tributes also. So this is pretty darn powerful. And it's very much so a key reason why you wouldn't want to run an extra deck in a Monarchs deck just alongside Domain. So if you have Domain and Monarchs Erupt at the same time, you basically just stonewall your opponent, especially if your opponent has no removal. And then finally, I have the Prime Monarch. Once per turn, you can target 2 Monarch spells and traps in your graveyard, shuffle them into the deck, then draw 1 card. Let's say you activate Pantheism and you throw away Tenacity, and you have the Prime Monarch on your field as a trap already set up. But you don't need to search anything with Pantheism. You can immediately use the Prime Monarch to shuffle both Tenacity and Pantheism back into your deck and then draw 1. So you just drew 2 and you drew 1 more. So you drew 3 at the cost of literally nothing. Literally nothing. But let's say you did need to search something. You throw away Pantheism and Tenacity to draw 2 cards. Then you search a card with Pantheism by banishing it. You then use the Prime Monarchs to shuffle your Tenacity and 1 other Monarch spell and trap card into your deck. You draw 1. So now there's no cost, plus you have plus on top of that. And then you summon Idea, the Heavenly Squire. You summon over her. She goes to the graveyard, and then you get your Pantheism back in your hand. This is such a cool recursion combo, and it happens more than you would think, especially even for an old school deck like Monarchs. And I'm just so glad for it. Now, that's enough about this deck and the cards and the pieces. Let me give you a demonstration. Alright, so going first is always what I want to do in this deck. Obviously, if you're playing online, you're not always going to get the opportunity to go first. This deck would not really hold up as a going second deck, but I'm just going to choose going first. I'm playing solo, I'm doing a demonstration, so on and so forth. I did forget to mention that the reason why I have 42 cards in this deck is because 42 cards isn't that much less consistent than just having 40 cards in your deck. So realistically speaking, for me, it's not really that big of a deal for me to have a card or so more. 42 cards is still pretty darn good. So it's just slightly less consistent than having 40. If you're going second, between 42 and 48 cards is pretty much the same consistency as having 40 cards going first. And what's cool about that is that means that if your deck is specifically meant to go second, you might as well fill it with 48 cards. You're going to have the same exact consistency concerning what you will draw in your deck based on your 3-ofs, your 2-ofs, and your 1-ofs. Very interesting thought there. Now, this is kind of unfortunate. I don't have a lot of good cards here for this turn. I am going to set all of this. It doesn't matter. If my opponent has something like Harpies or anything of that sort and destroys these, then I could actually summon the Prime Monarch from my graveyard. Because one thing I forgot to mention is that if this card is in your graveyard, you can banish one other Monarch spell and trap from your graveyard, special summon this card in defense position as a normal monster, Fairy Light, level 5, attack 1000, defense 2400. This card is not treated as a trap. You can only use this effect of the Prime Monarch once per turn. There are 2 Monarch trap cards that act as monsters. This is one, there is another. The other does not do this. The other acts as a trap card still. I don't like this. I wish that both had this effect where they were not treated as a trap, because then it would make the other pretty much just as good as this for different reasons. However, this card is not treated as a trap when it is special summoned as a monster, so it's pretty darn good. And because it is a trap in the grave, it can't be called by, which is pretty darn powerful. I'm going to go ahead and end my phase and see what my opponent is going to do here. I don't need to activate anything. Battle phase with pretty much nothing. I have to basically hope that I get a decent card. Alright, so I don't necessarily know why he didn't do that in the first place, but the bots are kind of stupid. Alright, I'm going to draw 2. So I have Ether, the Heavenly Squire, and I drew the Domain of the True Monarchs. So what's cool about this is I can level modulate Ether, and then I can activate Monarch Storm 4. I can put Return of the Monarchs on the field, and then I can use my opponent's 1 monster to summon mine. And of course I'm going to get 2400 because I would like my Majesty's Fiend. Now it is time to put 2 spells and traps into my grave. And it's always going to be the Prime Monarch and Pantheism if I don't have any other setup. And then what I will bring to my hand is probably Erebus. Very cool. Majesty's Fiend is on the field. Now I can banish Pantheism. And then I can also banish this card, Monarch Stormforth to summon Prime Monarch from the grave to my field. I can grab 3 cards from my deck to my hand. So right now, it's all pretty much gravy. I've won the duel. But I could easily do pretty much any one of these 3. I could do like a combination of them 3 just to... I don't care which one I get. Or I could just do 3 Tenacity. My opponent has to pick Tenacity, and then I could search any one of these. So I'm just going to go ahead and do this, and yep, I get Monarch Erupt. Now I'm going to Tribute Summon Majesty's Fiend over the Prime Monarch, and there we go. I have the game. Time to attack. So I had no monster on the field. I had a 2 Tribute Summon monster. I was able to level modulate to get a 1. I used the Stormforth to take my opponent's monster in a pretty much epic fashion because none of my monsters can beat a 3,000 point beater without the effect of Domain of the True Monarchs, particularly because that gives an extra 800 attack. And I just won the duel that way. It's a pretty fantastic deck. It's a pretty fun archetype, and I have plenty more to go over. In fact, a lot of decks to go over. So I want to thank you for joining me. If you like my content, please upvote and follow, or like and subscribe. Leave a comment down below, and while you're at it, have a great and glorious day gaming.